Welcome to the Cheating Wife Stories channel. Shane Barry pulled into his driveway, his mind swirling with sustainability metrics and zoning laws. The revolutionary Ecocity project had consumed his thoughts for months, but all of that evaporated in an instant as he spotted Morris Newton leaning against a sleek sports car. Morris' face twisted into a malicious grin. "Hey, Scene. Just dropping off Catherine after a wild night. She's upstairs getting ready for round 2. Don't worry, though. I left you a gift in your safe." Scene's muscles tensed as he exited his vehicle. Years of mixed martial arts training kicked in, and in one fluid motion, he grabbed Morris' wrist, twisting it sharply. Morris dropped to his knees, howling in pain as gravel bit into his skin. Scene leaned in close, his voice a low growl. "That's just the appetizer. You backstabbing piece of someone." The world had shifted on its axis in a few seconds. Scene's mind raced, trying to process the implications of Morris' words. His best friend and his wife. The betrayal cut deep, but Scene's face remained an impassive mask. Morris whimpered, trying to pull his arm free. "Come on, man. It was just a joke." Scene tightened his grip, feeling the bones and Morris' wrist grind together. "Funny. I'm not laughing." He released Morris with a shove, sending him sprawling onto the driveway. Scene stood over him, his eyes dark with barely contained fury. "Get out of here, Morris. And if I ever see you near my house again, you'll need more than a sports car to outrun me." Morris scrambled to his feet, clutching his wrist. For a moment, it looked like he might say something else, but one look at Scene's face changed his mind. He climbed into his car and peeled out of the driveway, tires squealing. Scene watched him go, his fists clenched at his sides. Then, with deliberate steps, he turned and entered the house. The foyer was quiet, but Scene could hear movement upstairs. His footsteps echoed ominously as he climbed the stairs, each step bringing him closer to a confrontation he never thought he'd face. He found Catherine in their bedroom, hastily zipping up a dress. Her eyes widened in fear as she saw the cold fury etched on Scene's face. "Scene, I can explain," she started, but Scene cut her off with a raised hand. "Save your lies, Catherine. I know everything," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "How long?" Catherine's demeanor shifted from fear to defiance. 8 months, she spat out. "Morris actually appreciates me. Unlike you with your precious projects." Scene's jaw clenched, but he maintained his composure. "I've been working on designs that could revolutionize urban living, Catherine, but I suppose that's beyond the comprehension of someone as shallow as you." He turned to leave, but Catherine grabbed his arm. "You can't just walk away. We need to talk about this." Scene shook her off, his eyes blazing. "We're done talking. Pack your bags and get out of my house." Now Catherine's face contorted with anger. "You can't kick me out. This is my house too." "Is it?" Scene's voice was cold. "Because from where I'm standing, you gave up any right to call this your home the moment you decided to betray my best friend." Catherine recoiled as if she'd been slapped. Scene took advantage of her momentary silence to continue. "You have 1 hour to get your things and leave. Anything left behind goes in the trash." He turned on his heel and strode out of the room, ignoring Catherine's protests. His mind was already moving on to the next step, the safe. Morris had mentioned leaving a gift there, and Scene had a sinking feeling about what he might find. Shane's study was his sanctuary, a place where he'd spent countless hours perfecting his designs. Now it felt tainted. He moved the abstract painting that concealed the safe, his hand steady despite the turmoil inside him. The safe opened with a soft click. Inside, he found a thick envelope. Its contents made his blood run cold. Photos of Catherine and Morris in compromising positions, financial documents showing joint accounts, and most shockingly, blueprints for Scene's Ecocity project. As the magnitude of the betrayal sank in, Scene's phone buzzed. It was Alvin Kinney, his project manager. "Scene, we've got a major problem." Someone's trying to sell our e-custody plans to a rival firm. The whole project's at risk. Sheen's mind raced, connecting the dots. He took a deep breath, compartmentalizing his personal turmoil. I'll be there in 30 minutes, Alvin. Don't do anything until I arrive. He hung up and looked back at the contents of the envelope. The betrayal went deeper than he could have imagined. Catherine and Morris hadn't just betrayed his trust. They tried to destroy everything he'd worked for. Sheen gathered the evidence, his movements precise and controlled. A plan was already forming in his mind. This wasn't just about his marriage anymore. It was about protecting his life's work, his legacy. As he headed for the door, he heard Catherine calling out to him. Sheen, we need to talk about this. He paused at the threshold of the study, turning to face her. Catherine stood there, her face a mix of anger and desperation. There's nothing to talk about, Sheen said, his voice devoid of emotion. You made your choice. Now you get to live with the consequences. Catherine's eyes widened as she saw the envelope in his hand. What is that? What are you going to do? Sheen's lips curved into a cold smile. I'm going to do what I do best, Catherine. I'm going to build something. And you and Morris, you're going to watch it all come crashing down around you. He brushed past her, heading for the front door. Catherine called out again, her voice breaking. Sheen, please. I made a mistake. Sheen paused, his hand on the door handle. Without turning around, he spoke, his voice low and final. No, Catherine, you made a series of choices. And now so am I. The door closed behind him with a decisive click, leaving Catherine alone in the house that was no longer her home. Sheen got into his car, his mind already shifting gears. The personal betrayal stung, but he couldn't afford to dwell on it now. There was a bigger fight ahead, and Sheenberry was going to make sure he came out on top. As he drove towards his office, Sheen's thoughts raced. The e-custody project was his magnum opus, the culmination of years of research and innovation. If Morris and Catherine thought they could steal it from him, they were in for a rude awakening. Sheen's grip tightened on the steering wheel. He trusted Catherine with everything, his heart, his home, his dreams. And she'd thrown it all away for what? A fling with Morris. The thought made his stomach churn, but Sheen wasn't one to wallow in self-pity. No, he was a man of action. And right now, action was exactly what was needed. He pulled into the parking lot of Berry Architectural Innovations, his mind clear and focused. As he walked into the building, he nodded at the night security guard. Working late again, Mr. Berry? The guard asked. Sheen managed a tight smile. Something like that, Frank. Looks like it's going to be a long night. He took the elevator to the top floor, where his office and the main conference room were located. As the doors opened, he saw Alvin pacing nervously in the hallway. Sheen, thank God you're here, Alvin said, his face pale with worry. I've been going over the security logs, and it looks like someone accessed our servers remotely last night. They copied a huge amount of data, including all the e-custody plans. Sheen's jaw tightened. I know who did it, Alvin. And we're going to stop them. Alvin's eyes widened. You know, who was it? Sheen ushered Alvin into the conference room, closing the door behind them. It was Morris and my wife. Alvin's jaw dropped. Catherine. But why? That's what we're going to find out, Sheen said, his voice hard. But first, we need to secure our project. Call Jamie, get her down here. We're going to need legal counsel for what comes next. As Alvin hurried to make the call, Sheen spread out the contents of the envelope on the conference table. The photos made his stomach turn, but he forced himself to look at them clinically. Evidence. That's all they were now. Jamie Rodriguez arrived 20 minutes later, looking sharp despite the late hour. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene. What's going on? Sheen asked cautiously. He gestured to the documents on the table. We've got a situation. Morris and Catherine have been working together to steal our e-custody plans. They've already accessed our servers and copied the data. Jamie's professional demeanor slipped for a moment. shock evident on her face. But she quickly composed herself, moving to examine the documents. "This is quite damning," she said after a few moments. "But Scene, you want to pursue this? It could get very messy very quickly." Scene's eyes hardened. "They tried to steal my life's work." Jamie nodded, her expression grim. "All right, then we need to move fast. We'll file for an emergency injunction first thing in the morning. That should buy us some time to figure out our next move." Scene nodded, then turned to Alvin. "I need you to go through every line of code, every blueprint, every scrap of data related to the e-custody project. If they've made any changes, no matter how small, I want to know about it." Alvin nodded, already pulling out his laptop. "I'm on it, boss." As Alvin and Jamie got to work, Scene stepped out onto the balcony attached to his office. The city sprawled out before him, a glittering tapestry of lights. Somewhere out there, Catherine and Morris were probably celebrating their supposed victory. Scene's hands gripped the railing, his knuckles white. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd beaten him. But Scene Barry wasn't going down without a fight. And this fight was just beginning. He turned back to the conference room, where Alvin and Jamie were hunched over their work. "This is my team, my real family. And together, we're going to make Catherine and Morris regret the day they ever crossed Scene Barry." As the night wore on, Scene threw himself into the work. Every line of code, every financial document, every legal precedent became a weapon in his arsenal. By the time the sun began to peek over the horizon, they had the beginnings of a plan. "All right," Scene said, his voice hoarse from hours of discussion. "Here's what we're going to do. Jamie, I want you to file that injunction as soon as the courts open. Make it ironclad. I don't want Morris or Catherine able to breathe without our permission." Jamie nodded, already scribbling notes. "I'll have it ready in an hour." "Good. Alvin, I need you to implement the security protocols we discussed. Lock down everything. And I mean everything. If anyone so much as tries to access our servers without proper clearance, I want to know about it." Alvin gave a tired salute. "You got it, boss. I'll get the tech team on it right away." Sheen looked at his team, feeling a surge of pride. They'd been through hell tonight, but they've come out swinging. "Thank you both. I know this isn't what any of us expected, but I couldn't ask for a better team." As Alvin and Jamie gathered their things and headed out, Scene turned back to the window. The city was waking up, unaware of the battle that had been waged through the night. But soon, everyone would know. Scene Barry was not a man to be trifled with, and Catherine and Morris were about to learn that lesson the hard way. Scene's phone buzzed. A text from Catherine. "We need to talk. Please." He deleted it without responding. There was nothing left to say. From now on, they'd communicate through lawyers. Scene took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. The war had begun, and he intended to win, no matter the cost. Scene Barry strode into the offices of Barry Architectural Innovations the next morning, his appearance impeccable despite the emotional tempest raging inside him. The lobby fell silent as he passed, employees sensing the barely contained fury radiating from their normally composed boss. He didn't bother with pleasantries, heading straight for the conference room, where Alvin, Kenny, and Jamie Rodriguez were already waiting. As he entered, both stood, their faces a mix of concern and determination. "Our e-custody project has been compromised," Scene announced, his voice steady. "But we're not just going to play defense. It's time to go on the offensive." Alvin's brow furrowed. "What do you have in mind?" Scene laid out his plan, his words precise and calculated. "We're going to feed false information about the project, tantalizing bits of data that any corporate spy would salivate over. Meanwhile, we'll launch an aggressive marketing campaign to secure additional investors and partners." Jamie leaned forward, her sharp mind already dissecting the strategy. "You're setting a trap." "Exactly," Scene nodded. "We'll smoke out the mole in our company and catch our rivals red-handed." Alvin nodded, his fingers already flying over his tablet. I can start planting the false data immediately. We'll need to be careful, though. Make it believable enough to bait the hook, but not so accurate that we risk our actual plans. Scene turned to Jamie. I need you to draft a series of non-disclosure agreements, ironclad ones. Anyone who so much as looks at a blueprint for this project needs to sign one. Jamie was already making notes. I'll have drafts on your desk by this afternoon. What about the marketing campaign? I want it to be aggressive, but not desperate. Scene said, we need to project confidence, even in the face of this setback. Set up meetings with our top-tier investors. I'll handle those personally. As the team dispersed to execute the plan, Jamie pulled Scene aside. This is risky, Scene. Scene's eyes gleamed with determination. Sometimes, Jamie, you have to risk everything to save what matters most. Jamie studied him for a moment, then nodded. All right. I'm with you. But Scene, be careful. This isn't just about the project anymore, is it? Scene's jaw tightened. No, it's not. But I can handle it. Over the next week, Scene worked tirelessly, his mind focused solely on the task at hand. He planted breadcrumbs of tantalizing but false information about the Ecosity project, each morsel more irresistible than the last. In meetings with investors, he was the picture of confidence and innovation. Imagine, he'd say, spreading out meticulously crafted blueprints. A city that doesn't just coexist with nature, but actively nurtures it. Our Ecosity isn't just about sustainable living. It's about thriving in harmony with our environment. To the outside world, he maintained a facade of normalcy. But inside, he was a coiled spring, waiting for the trap to be sprung. Alvin approached him on the 5th day, his face grim. Scene, we've detected unauthorized access to our servers. Someone took the bait. Scene's eyes narrowed. Do we know who? Not yet, but we've narrowed it down to a handful of IP addresses. One of them is registered to McLaughlin and Associates. A cold smile spread across Scene's face. Perfect. Keep monitoring. I want to know the moment they make their move. Late one night, as Scene worked alone in his office, a silent alarm triggered. He watched via hidden camera as a figure sneaked into the research and development lab. A smile spread across his face as he recognized the intruder, Gregory McLaughlin, Morris's boss, and Scene's longtime rival. Scene made his way to the lab, his footsteps silent. He found Gregory hunched over a computer, frantically copying files onto a thumb drive. I expected Morris to be desperate enough to try this himself, Scene said, his voice cutting through the silence. But you, Gregory, that's disappointing. Gregory whirled around, his face pale. Scene, this isn't what it looks like. Really? Because it looks like corporate espionage to me, Scene replied. Gregory's shock quickly morphed into a sneer. Your precious Ecosity was never going to work, Scene. We're just redistributing the good ideas. Oh, I think you'll find those good ideas aren't quite what you expected, Scene said as security guards entered the room. Enjoy explaining corporate espionage charges to a judge. As Gregory was led away in handcuffs, Scene allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Phase 1 of his plan was complete, but the personal betrayal still needed to be addressed. The next morning, Scene called an emergency board meeting. As he laid out the events of the previous night, he could see the shock and outrage on the faces of his fellow board members. Ladies and gentlemen, Scene concluded, this attempt at corporate espionage has only strengthened my resolve. Our Ecosity project isn't just innovative, it's revolutionary enough that our competitors are willing to risk everything to get their hands on it. I propose we double down on our efforts, increase our security, yes, but also accelerate our timeline. Let's show the world what Berry Architectural Innovations is capable of. The board's approval was unanimous. As the meeting adjourned, Scene felt a surge of momentum. The trap had been sprung, and now it was time for the next phase of his plan. The annual Architectural Innovation Gala was just days away, and Scene knew it would provide the perfect stage for the next act of his revenge. He spent hours with his tailor, ensuring his tuxedo was perfectly fitted. Every detail had to be immaculate. On the night of the gala, Scene arrived alone, cutting a striking figure in his bespoke tuxedo. Whispers followed him as he made his way through the crowd. News of his separation from Catherine had spread through the industry grapevine like wildfire. He mingled effortlessly, shaking hands and making small talk. To anyone watching, he appeared to be the very picture of a successful, confident businessman. But his eyes never stopped scanning the room, waiting for his targets to arrive. Midway through the evening, Catherine and Morris made their entrance, clearly intending to flaunt their relationship. Catherine wore a daring red gown that left little to the imagination, while Morris sported a smug grin along with his rented tux. Scene watched them from across the room, his face impassive. He saw the way Catherine's eyes darted around nervously, the forced nature of her smile. Morris, on the other hand, seemed to be reveling in the attention, his arm wrapped possessively around Catherine's waist. Scene approached the couple, champagne flute in hand. "Catherine, Morris, how good of you to come. I was hoping you'd be here." Catherine's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "What are you playing at, Scene?" "Oh, I just wanted to share some news with my dear wife and best friend," Scene replied, his voice dripping with sarcasm. He tapped a spoon against his glass, calling for attention. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Scene. He could feel the weight of their gazes, the anticipation in the air. This was his moment, and he intended to make it count. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have an announcement to make." Scene projected his voice across the ballroom. "As some of you may know, my wife Catherine and my former friend Morris have been engaged in an affair." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Catherine's face paled, while Morris started to back away. Scene continued, his voice hardening. "What you may not know is that they also attempted to steal proprietary designs from my firm. Tonight, I'm pleased to announce that thanks to their actions, McLaughlin and Associates is facing federal charges for corporate espionage." The room erupted in chaos. Catherine lunged at Scene, nails raking across his cheek. "You bastard!" she screamed. "You've ruined everything." Security quickly separated them, escorting Catherine and Morris from the gala. As they were led away, Scene locked eyes with Morris. The message was clear. This was far from over. As the doors closed behind Catherine and Morris, the room buzzed with shocked conversations. Scene straightened his tie, ignoring the thin line of blood on his cheek where Catherine's nails had caught him. Jamie appeared at his side, her face a mix of concern and admiration. "That was quite a show. Scene, are you all right?" Scene's lips curved into a cold smile. "Never better, Jamie. Sometimes you have to lance the boil to let the poison out." Across the room, a group of investors who had been wavering on the e-custody project approached Scene. Their leader, a steel-haired woman named Victoria Hartley, extended her hand. "Mr. Barry, I must say, your handling of this situation has been impressive. Perhaps we should revisit our discussions about the e-custody project." Scene shook her hand firmly. "I'd be delighted. Ms. Hartley, shall we set up a meeting for next week?" As Victoria nodded her agreement, Scene caught sight of his reflection in a nearby mirror. The man staring back at him was harder, colder than the one who had entered the ballroom. But he was also stronger. Catherine and Morris had tried to break him, but instead they'd forged him into something more formidable. The gala continued around him, but Scene's mind was already racing ahead. This was just the beginning. He had exposed the rot at the core of his personal and professional life, but now came the real challenge, rebuilding everything better and stronger than before. As he mingled with the crowd, accepting condolences and fielding business propositions with equal grace, Scene felt a sense of clarity he hadn't experienced in months. The betrayal had cut deep, but it had also freed him. No more distractions, no more divided loyalties. From now on, Scene Barry would be focused on one thing, and one thing only: success. The night wore on, a blur of handshakes and meaningful glances. By the time Scene left the gala, his phone was filled with messages from potential investors and partners, all eager to align themselves with the man who had so decisively outmaneuvered his opponents. As his car pulled away from the venue, Scene looked back at the glittering lights of the ballroom. He had entered as a wronged husband and emerged as a force to be reckoned with. Catherine and Morris thought they had won, but their victory was as hollow as their morals. In the days following the gala, Scene threw himself into his work with renewed vigor. The E-Custody project, far from being derailed by the attempted theft, had gained a new level of prestige. Investors who had been on the fence were now clamoring to be part of what they saw as a game-changing venture. Scene sat in his office, reviewing the latest projections with Alvin. The numbers were promising, but Scene wasn't satisfied. "We need to push harder," he said, tapping his pen against the desk. "This isn't just about building a sustainable city anymore. It's about redefining what's possible in urban development." Alvin nodded, making notes. "I'll get the team to revise the plans. We can probably increase the green space by another 15% if we reconfigure the transportation grid." "Do it," Scene said. "And I want daily progress reports. We're not just going to meet our deadlines. We're going to beat them." As Alvin left, Jamie entered with a stack of papers in her hand. "Scene, I've got the latest on the McLaughlin case. The prosecutors are pushing for the maximum sentence. Gregory's looking at serious jail time." Scene leaned back in his chair, a satisfaction settling over him. "Good. Make sure our legal team gives them whatever they need. I want this to be airtight." Jamie hesitated for a moment. "There's something else." Catherine's lawyer reached out. "She's asking for a meeting to discuss the divorce settlement." Scene's jaw tightened. "Tell them my terms haven't changed. She gets nothing beyond what the prenup stipulates. If she doesn't like it, she can try her luck in court." As Jamie left, Scene turned to look out the window at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Catherine and Morris were dealing with the fallout of their actions. He allowed himself a moment to imagine their distress, their growing realization of just how badly they had miscalculated. But Scene didn't dwell on it for long. He had a city to build, an empire to expand. Catherine and Morris were already becoming distant memories, cautionary tales in the story of his success. He turned back to his desk, pulling up the latest designs for the E-Custody. There was work to be done, and Sceneberry was just getting started. In the weeks following the gala, Catherine and Morris's lives began to unravel like a cheap sweater. Morris, now unemployed and under investigation, grew increasingly paranoid and volatile. His once smug grin had morphed into a permanent scowl, his eyes darting nervously whenever he ventured out in public. Catherine, for her part, found herself abruptly shunned by her social circle. The women who had once admired her designer outfits and lavish parties now crossed the street to avoid her. Her credit cards were declined with embarrassing frequency, cutting her off from the luxurious lifestyle she had come to see as her birthright. One particularly humiliating afternoon, Catherine stood in line at a high-end boutique, arms laden with dresses she couldn't afford. As the cashier swiped her card, Catherine's heart raced. The machine beeped, an angry red light flashing. "I'm sorry, Mom," the cashier said, not sounding sorry at all. "Your card's been declined." Catherine felt the eyes of the other customers boring into her. "There must be some mistake," she stammered. "Try it again." The cashier did, with the same result. Catherine's face burned as she slunk out of the store, empty-handed and humiliated. Meanwhile, Morris wasn't faring much better. His laptop had been seized as evidence, his phone was probably tapped, and he jumped at every unexpected noise. The strain was beginning to show in the deep lines etched around his mouth and the gray creeping into his temples. One evening, as rain lashed against the windows of the cheap motel room they now called home, Morris paced like a caged animal. "This is all your fault," he spat at Catherine. "If you hadn't been so obvious about the affair." Catherine's eyes flashed. "My fault? You were the one who convinced me to use Scene's designs. You said it would be easy money." Morris's hand twitched, as if he wanted to slap her. "Well, if you hadn't been such an incompetent thief, Their bickering was interrupted by a knock at the door. Both froze, exchanging panicked glances. Morris approached the door cautiously, peering through the peephole. His shoulders sagged with relief as he recognized the visitor. "It's just the pizza guy," he muttered, fumbling for his wallet. But as he opened the door, two men in dark suits pushed their way in. "Morris Newton," one asked, flashing a badge. "We have some questions about your involvement in a corporate espionage case." As Morris was led away in handcuffs, Catherine sat on the bed, her head in her hands. How had it all gone so wrong? Across town, Seenberry sat in his home office, reviewing the latest updates on the e-custody project. The betrayal had only fueled his determination, and the plans were more ambitious than ever. He was so engrossed in his work that he almost missed the sound of breaking glass downstairs. Seen's instincts kicked in, years of martial arts training taking over. He moved silently through the darkened house, following the sound of muffled voices coming from his study. "We have to do something, Morris." Catherine's voice was shrill with panic. "He's destroying us." "Keep your voice down, Morris," he hissed. "I have a plan. We just need to access his personal files. There has to be something we can use against him." Seen stepped into the doorway, his silhouette illuminated by a flash of lightning. "Looking for something?" Catherine screamed in surprise, while Morris lunged for Seen. A vicious fight ensued, with Seen's martial arts training giving him the edge. He ducked under Morris's wild swing, using the other man's momentum to slam him into the wall. Morris rebounded, charging at Seen like a wounded bull. Seen sidestepped, grabbing Morris's arm and twisting it behind his back. Morris howled in pain as Seen forced him to the ground, pinning him there with a knee in his back. "You never learned, do you? Breaking and entering, attempted theft. You're really not helping your case, Morris." Catherine stood frozen, her eyes wide with fear and something else, a grudging admiration for the man she had so foolishly betrayed. As sirens wailed in the distance, Seen turned to Catherine. "Is this really the person you chose over me?" A desperate, failed individual. Catherine's face crumpled in defeat as the police arrived to arrest them both. As they were led away, Seen caught a glimpse of Catherine's face. For a moment, he thought he saw a flicker of regret in her eyes. But then it was gone, replaced by the same selfish defiance he had come to expect from her. Seen watched as the police car drove away, feeling not triumph, but a weary sort of satisfaction. The storm had passed, both literally and figuratively. Now it was time to rebuild. Months passed. Seen threw himself into his work, pushing the boundaries of sustainable architecture. The e-custody project, far from being derailed by the attempted theft, had gained international attention for its innovative approach to urban planning. Seen's days were a blur of meetings, design reviews, and negotiations. He worked harder than he ever had before, driven by a combination of ambition and the need to prove that he was more than the sum of his personal tragedies. At the project's groundbreaking ceremony, Seen stood before a crowd of investors, politicians, and media. The air was thick with anticipation, camera flashes popping like fireflies in the early evening light. As Seen began his speech, his eyes scanned the crowd, and he spotted two familiar faces at the back. Catherine and Morris, looking haggard and resentful, had slipped and gone unnoticed by the security guards. For a moment, Seen faltered. Then he squared his shoulders, his voice strong and clear as he addressed the assembled crowd. "This e-custody represents more than just buildings and infrastructure," Seen said, his gaze never wavering from the two people who had tried to destroy him. "It's about resilience, about taking the worst life can throw at us and using it as a foundation to build something extraordinary." As Seen spoke, he saw the emotions play across Catherine's face. Anger, regret, and finally, a dawning realization of what she had thrown away. Morris, for his part, just looked bitter, his eyes darting around as if searching for an escape route. "We stand here today not just to break ground on a new city," Seen continued, "but to lay the foundation for a new way of living. A way that respects our planet, nurtures community, and proves we can thrive without destroying the world around us." The crowd erupted in applause. As camera flashes popped and reporters clamored for quotes, Scene saw Catherine and Morris slink away, finally understanding the magnitude of what they had lost. Later that evening, as Scene was leaving his office, basking in the glow of the successful groundbreaking, he found Catherine waiting by his car. She was a shadow of her former self, her designer clothes replaced by worn jeans and a faded t-shirt. "Scene, please," she begged. Her voice was hoarse. "I've lost everything. I made a terrible mistake. Can't we try again?" Scene regarded her coldly, remembering the vibrant, confident woman he had married. The person before him now seemed small, diminished by her own choices. "Where's Morris?" Scene asked, his voice devoid of emotion. "Did he abandon you when things got tough?" Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "He left weeks ago," she said. "I was dragging him down." "Scene, you're all I have left." For a moment, Scene felt a flicker of the love he once had for her, but then he remembered the betrayal, the pain, the attempted sabotage of everything he'd worked for. The feeling died as quickly as it had come. "You made your choice, Catherine," he said firmly. "Now you have to live with it. I've moved on, and so should you." As he got into his car, Catherine called out desperately, "What am I supposed to do now?" Scene paused, his hand on the door handle. He turned back to her, his face impassive. "Start over, build something of your own for once. And remember this feeling the next time you're tempted to destroy someone else's life for your own selfish desires." He drove away, leaving Catherine alone in the parking lot. In his rearview mirror, he watched her figure grow smaller, a chapter of his life finally closing. As Scene drove home, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The confrontation with Catherine had been the final act in a drama that had consumed his life for too long. Now, at last, he could focus entirely on the future. The e-custody project consumed Scene's days and nights over the next year. He pushed himself and his team harder than ever, determined to create something truly revolutionary. The setbacks and challenges were numerous, but Scene met each one head-on, his resolve strengthened by the trials he had overcome. Finally, after months of grueling work, the first phase of the e-custody was complete. Scene stood at the window of his new penthouse, overlooking the burgeoning metropolis. Solar panels glinted on rooftops, while green spaces bloomed between the sleek, sustainable buildings. It was more than just a city. It was a vision of the future made real. Scene's firm was thriving, his innovative designs reshaping skylines across the world. The betrayal that had once threatened to destroy him had become the crucible from which his greatest achievements were born. On his desk sat a letter, an invitation to be a keynote speaker at an international architecture symposium. As he picked it up, a small news clipping fell out. Curious, Scene unfolded it. It was a small article about a local community center offering job training programs. In the grainy photo, he spotted a familiar face, Catherine, volunteering as a receptionist. Scene allowed himself a small smile. The wound of betrayal had healed, leaving behind not a scar, but a badge of resilience. He had emerged stronger, wiser, and more successful than ever before. As he turned back to the window, gazing out at the city he had helped shape, Sceneberry felt a sense of peace settle over him. The past was behind him, the future stretching out bright and full of possibility. And as the sun set over his e-custody, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Scene knew that the best was yet to come. 1 year later, Scene stood at the window of his new penthouse, overlooking the burgeoning e-custody. His firm was thriving, his innovative designs reshaping skylines across the world. The betrayal that once threatened to destroy him had become the crucible from which his greatest achievements were born. On his desk sat a letter, an invitation to be a keynote speaker at an international architecture symposium. As he picked it up, a small news clipping fell out. It was a small article about a local community center offering job training programs. In the grainy photo, he spotted a familiar face, Catherine, volunteering as a receptionist. Scene allowed himself a small smile. The wound of betrayal had healed, leaving behind not a scar, but a badge of resilience. He'd emerged stronger, wiser, and more successful than ever before. As for Catherine, her fall from grace had been swift and merciless. After the failed break-in attempt, she'd served a short sentence for her role in the corporate espionage. Upon release, she found herself shunned by her former social circle and struggling to rebuild her life. The receptionist position at the community center was a far cry from her previous lifestyle. But it was a start. Morris hadn't fared much better. His involvement in the espionage case had led to a longer prison sentence. Upon his release, he found himself unemployable in his former field, his reputation in tatters. Last Scene had heard, Morris was working as a night janitor at a small office building, a far cry from his former executive position. As Scene turned back to the window, gazing out at the city he helped shape, he felt no lingering anger towards Catherine or Morris. Their actions had set him on a path to greater success than he'd ever imagined. And as the sun set over his eco-city, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Sceneberry knew that the best was yet to come. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.